Jeff Bailey here. I'd like to introduce you to Linda Yameen. She is a longtime student now, and she's a graduate of the Vita Yoga Teacher Training. And welcome, Lynn. I'd just like to welcome you and start off with the first question, which is, how did you find out about the Avita Teacher Training, and what inspired you to this practice and to the teacher training?
Well, I was lucky enough to meet Jeff Bailey online. Of course, that seems to be how we're meeting people these days. And as a member of the Teachers of God Association, Jeff was featured as the yoga teacher during a Pure Presence conference. And I tuned in to the yoga presentation thinking it would be, same old, same old. And what I found was completely different than any style of yoga I had ever practiced. And I'd practiced a lot of different styles of yoga. I taught yoga for 10 years. And when I met Jeff and he presented, I think an hour-long class, maybe 45 minutes, I was attracted to this peaceful quality in the teaching. And of course, Jeff emanates that so beautifully. But the shapes that he taught us to do were very interesting, and they were inviting. And they were just enough different than the tried and true yoga shapes that they drew me in a different way. And I was able to not just practice the shapes, but I was able to tap into this peaceful, still presence. So it wasn't an athletic endeavor. I wasn't trying to exercise. I was just being in the shape. And Jeff's gentle guidance was just like the bonus. That was like the icing on the cake as he led us through classes. So that was my first introduction. Yeah.
And I've gotten to know you pretty well. You came to part 2 in Minnesota, where we had the in-person part of the training. We got to have hands-on. We got to see how tall we each were. We got to really experience each other in person, which was super fun. And I know that you have a pretty athletic body. You're a pickleball player. I think you play almost every day. And with your previous yoga background, your yoga probably did have an athletic quality to it. So in my perspective, you just adapted almost overnight. You just went from one style to this, and you just really went into it. But how was that transition for you? What did you really glean during the process of transitioning your life from one style to this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And, I agree with your assessment that I really did just sort of click and I shifted. I think it was your explanation of using the muscles to get to the bones that made so much sense to me. I've been working with muscles, as a yoga teacher and talking about stretching and strengthening for a decade. And it's not that it didn't feel good, it did, but I was able to go so much deeper when I understood a little bit about the bones and how you can reshape the joint. And that was something that was brand new to me. And I was so intrigued that it was really fast. I didn't fight it saying, oh my gosh, I've never been taught this way. I'm just like, okay, Jeff, show me, teach me. I'm here. I want to find out about how we can reshape bones and
I
reshape
just
the
love that
joint.
about the practice. Yeah. We gotta get to the problem. We know that from, you mentioned the Teachers of God Foundation, which I always like to say to listeners, another way to think of that is teacher of love. God has so many connotations, but I think we can also all relate to the idea that of just pure love. And so that's what we want to teach, because that's what we are. And that's ultimately a kind of an essence of this practice, isn't it?
It is.
But
it's beautiful.
So using the muscles to get to the bones, where the problem is. We got to get to the problem. So, Linda, now you've been a graduate now for a couple of years. How's it going? I know you got a group of students. They're just seem to be eating it up just like you did.
Yes. What I found is that my students, as they were aging, just like all of us are, they were having some issues show up really for really no reason. They'd have an achy hip, a bad knee, a sore shoulder, and they weren't doing anything really. It was just showing up because of life in general. And so when I began to transition my classes to say, okay, now we're going to be on the floor, probably the whole time. And they were like, we're not getting up. What? This is different. But I think they realized right away that just the simple shapes that I was putting them into were much more effective than when we were doing the standing shapes with a lot of, muscle contraction and a lot of just force, really, instead of ease.
Wow. So they
Yeah.
moved right into this new style almost as quickly as you did.
Yeah, they did. They shifted, and I think they were also at an age. Most of my students are in their 60s and 70s. I have a few students in their 40s or 50s, but maybe only one or two.
Mhm.
Everybody else is in their 60s and 70s. And I have found, since I'm in my 60s, people in their 60s and 70s, they really want to feel better. They crave that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they are feeling stiffness. So, oh, this is
Yeah. I was just thinking
working
about that
really good.
concept a couple days ago. I was thinking, how the people that gravitate toward Avita yoga tend to be over 40. And I always joke that if you're not ready for Avita yoga, then it's not really a joke, it's tongue in cheek maybe. But if you're not ready for Avita yoga, then you're either not old enough or you haven't had enough injuries. But we
Yes.
teach, I mean, the same thing we teach to a person over 40 would be super helpful for somebody under 40, even in their 20s. This concept of using the muscles to get deeper in the body instead of just focusing on muscles, muscles, muscles. But generally speaking, when we're too young, like Mark Twain said, youth is wasted on the young. We we um, we take it for granted, and all we want to do is perform and do stuff. So eventually we get to this tipping point where, oh, wait a minute, I need to slow down. I'm going to go in, I'm going to go deeper. And that's what it's all about. And I think that's where, at some point, we all start to feel the desire for that. And then we start to feel the juice and the joy and the life that comes from it. Yeah.
Beautifully said. Yes, that's it,
Yeah.
Jeff.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here, Linda. I really appreciate you. Appreciate you sharing this practice. And I'll see you at the next teacher training, the next retreat. I hope to bump into you again. We always have fun together.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. Jeff, you are an inspiration, and I love everything you've taught me. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Namaste.